So our final speaker for this session is Prakriti Garg, who is a student in the Sushmita Roy's lab at the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery. And she'll be sharing about gene regulatory networks. Your mic on.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Hi everyone, I am Prakriti Garg and I'm an incoming PhD student in University of Wisconsin-Madison. And last month, I just completed my master's in computer science and biomedical data science, again in this university. So I would like to thank the meeting organizers for giving us the wonderful opportunity to present our research work of Roy Lab, where I'll be briefly discussing today about gene regulatory networks and how we use CHTC resources for that. So first of all, to start, what exactly are gene regulatory networks? So let's consider this piece of DNA which encodes a gene, and let's represent this gene by a blue circle. So now we know that genes don't work by themselves alone. Rather, genes interact with a lot of other genes in a particular network. So these can be different metabolic networks, and the type of network which we are most interested in are called gene regulatory networks. So they basically control that which genes are expressed when and where. So these are directed graphs, and genes represents the different nodes. And essentially, we can say that the edge between two genes, a regulator and a target, represents that X controls Y, or basically X regulates Y. So essentially, gene regulatory networks control which genes are expressed when and where. Now, the human body has trillions of cells, and every cell contains genes. So to better understand human health and human diseases, it is very important to understand the cellular mechanisms behind the different types of cells we have in our body. Because it's these cells and genes, it's the interplay of these cells and genes which help us in understanding that how the disease progresses. And as we know that human body is multicellular, we have different kind of cells in our body. For example, skin cell, blood cell, and neuronal cells. And each of these cell types have different underlying networks, the gene regulatory networks in them. So this is good that we have a basic understanding of what is gene regulatory networks. But how can we study gene regulatory networks, and how can we apply computational techniques to study these networks? So how can we gather this data is, we can basically sample, let's say, kidney tissue from human or any species, like let's say mouse, which is basically represented. Tissue is essentially just a group of cells. And there are two common approaches which we use in wet lab. One will be simple bulk omics, where we don't differentiate the cells and rather sequence them all together. And therefore, we get an average expression value of all the genes. So basically, the data looks like a matrix where the rows represents the different genes we have in these cells, and the column represents the different time points. But this has the downside that we cannot differentiate between the different cell types. So what should we do? So more recently, we have a newer technology called a single cell omics, where within the different types of cells which we have, we differentiate each of these cell types and then profile each of the cell type independently, so as to get different types, basically different matrices for each of the cell types, to better understand the cell type specific gene regulatory networks. So basically here we have genes and cells, and then we have different time points. So I'll be showing basically what's the importance of time points in particular examples. Next. So advances in single cell omics have already advanced our knowledge of human diseases quite a lot. And like, if you want to read more, this is a very interesting review article which which uh, basically specifies how single cell omics have advanced our understanding of diseases, for example, like cancer and COVID-19. So to understand gene regulatory networks, what are the types of questions we want to focus on? So first of all, what are the different types of cells we have, whatever data we are considering? Then how are these different cell types connected? Next is, given a cell type, what is the gene regulatory network of each of the cell types? And then how are these GRNs changing across the different cell types? Of course, we can have any method, but it's important to basically estimate that how accurate are the GRNs. So today we'll be basically mostly focusing on how can we make GRNs and how do these change. So first of all, to start to infer this gene regulatory networks, basic network inference includes we have some kind of high throughput data where we essentially have node measurements. So in probably you guys will understand like computer science terms better. So we have a matrix having rows and different cells. So rows again are like genes and the columns are the cells. And these values essentially represent that, for example, this gene 6 is highly expressed active in E1 cell. So we have this some kind of data, and from this data, we want to infer the nodes we already have, but we want to infer basically what's the structure of this graph and which basically which genes are targeting which targets. So in terms of network biology language, this is essentially an unsupervised learning algorithm, unsupervised learning problem basically, since we just have this data, nothing else. And we don't have basically any, let's say, we don't have any supervised data, and we want to learn the graph structure as well as the parameters. So again, in inferring gene regulatory networks, Roy Lab has done a couple of research in this area, and specifically, we are examining cell type specific networks in like these different areas. So cellular reprogramming, which essentially is how one cell converts into another cell type. Second, a very good example is like how early brain development happens, and then nitrogen fixation in plants, which I'll be focusing more in the subsequent slides, and then gene editing in the retina. If we can edit genes in our eyes to cure retina pigmentosis. So this is again very interesting. So briefly, I'll be focusing on two examples of how GRNs can help us disentangle biological complexity. First is how we can enable plants to get nitrogen from the air instead of using external fertilizers. And then how can we understand how and if can we understand compensatory renal growth in kidney. So nitrogen, as you might all know, that it's a very critical nutrient in plants, and without nitrogen, plants have stunted growth, and basically it's important for the plant survival, and we all need crops. So one of the major resources we basically provide to plants to have nitrogen is fertilizers, right? The heavy use of fertilizers is not very sustainable. First of all, because of the cost factors, and again, second is the environmental footprint. There's a lot of greenhouse gases emitted as well, so it is not very sustainable. Turns out, interestingly, two crops, corn and sorghum, have this very interesting property in their aerial roots that when it interacts with water, like for example, rain happens and the aerial roots is in contact with water, aerial roots excretes, basically produces basically item thing called as mucilage. Mucilage is basically like a gel-like structure. And this mucilage has this property that it can host nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So these bacteria can take up nitrogen from the air, and 82% approximately of the plant's nitrogen needs is taken care of from the nitrogen from the air. So definitely the use of fertilizers is minimized a lot. Now, what we want to study here is that can we basically understand how this plant fixes nitrogen? What is the genetic mechanism which this basically mucilage and the aerial root uses? So if we can understand it, can we basically make this process more efficient and also implement this process in other crops? So this project is basically called as SONAR, the sorghum nitrogen fixation in aerial roots. So for this, collaborators and lab again at UW-Madison generated some single nuclei experiment data. And Roy Lab is focusing on the downstream analysis of clustering and basically inferring cell type specific gene regulatory networks. Another important thing I want to mention is we are interested in sorghum and maize, but since their lifespan are pretty big, so wet lab validation of the important regulators will take a lot many years. So for wet lab validation, we are also considering a model organism called as Medicago because it has a much shorter lifespan. So doing wet lab experiments on Medicago is very much efficient. So the overall basically analysis pipeline of this project looked like the ANLAB shared us the single nuclei data, which again are three matrices, Y3 because we have three species. And then we first did like basic pre-processing of the data sets, that is removing cells which are lowly expressed and normalizing the data set, standard steps. Then the next step was to cluster these cells into different cell types using like two different tools which we have in Roy Lab, NMF and TMF. NMF is generic, TMF is our labs tool. And then how to infer lineage tree. Lineage tree is again the relationship of the different cell types we have. And using this, how to infer the cell type specific gene regulatory networks in order to identify some key regulators identified using these gene regulatory networks, and then basically doing wet lab validation if these regulators actually make sense. So to identify cell clusters, the basic method which we use is called as non-negative matrix factorization. And what does this method do? So as we can basically factor a large number into two smaller numbers, let's say 10 equals 5 into 2. Similarly, we can factor a matrix into two smaller submatrices, which if we multiply together can basically approximately have a good estimation of the original matrix. So how does NMF does that? So let's consider a very simple example of Netflix challenge. Let's say we have different users and we have different movies. Now, let's assume that since in clustering, we have to basically estimate the number of clusters, and mostly we specify how many clusters we want. So let's assume there are two types of users and there are two types of movies. Now we want to make subgroups of these movies and users. So NMF essentially using an optimization problem can help us identify these groups. So using NMF, we from our single nuclei data of Medicago species, this is particularly for Medicago, we identified the different cell clusters. So here, basically, we chose K equals to 10. So that is like 10 different cell types we have here. And this annotation just shows dry and wet samples. So since mucilage is only produced in wet sample, so dry is basically kind of control. So with the help of ANLAB, what we did is we identified and basically annotated the specific cell types we have. These are all parts of plant, and identified what the lineage tree will look like. So basically how these different tissues like meristem, root, cap, and other stuff are related to each other. Once we have these cell types defined, now we want to infer the gene regulatory networks, identify the connections between the transcription factors and the target genes. So for this, we use two types of algorithms, again, in Roy Lab. So first one is called Merlin, and the second one is SCMTNI. So SCMTNI focuses more on cell type specific GRNs, whereas Merlin does not have cell type specific GRNs. So I'll be focusing more on SCMTNI. Briefly, not going into a lot of details. So SEMTNI is essentially takes the RNA-seq data. It can also take ATAC-seq and different prior networks or motifs, but in this project, we just have RNA-seq data. And then the lineage tree, which we identified using NMF before. So it's basically a probabilistic graph-based model. And through this algorithm, for each of the cell types, we identified different gene regulatory networks for each of these species. So to basically differentiate between the single task network inference and multitask network inference, one naive way could be we consider each of these cell types independently and infer the network. But since we have the cell type lineage identified, why not make good use of it? So basically, we are considering the relationships between these different cell types and then trying to infer the individual networks. And that's the basically plus point of SEMTNI. So in terms of how we use CHTC resources here, so SEMTNI learns regulators on a per target basis. And for robustness, we run a basically particular subset multiple number of times, usually 100 we consider. So if we consider sorghum species, there were 36,800 jobs here. And this is kind of a smaller data. So if we had run this locally just on the Roy Lab servers, it would have taken 200 plus days. And obviously, nobody has so much time. I mean, when will I graduate? And when we can actually see the real world impact? And this is only considering one species and one tool. And God forbid if I did a stupid mistake in the cell lineage trees. So here comes Condor to the rescue. Condor reduced the time to approximately just 2 days. So it's awesome. So after identifying the different basically regulators from the two algorithms, SEMTNI and Morlin, our goal was to identify key regulators. So we of these two tools, we got a list of regulators which were common in both these tools, and our collaborators, wet lab collaborators, are now basically validating whether these regulators actually make sense. He's validating 5, 3 of them turned out to be good. So let's see how the other 2 works out. So all in all, we have analyzed the single cell data set of 3 species. And moving forward, we are basically going to analyze multi-species data as well. So we can consider different species together. And I'll be explaining TMF for the next project, which can be applied here as well. So second project is, which I'm more interested in, is compensatory renal growth in kidney. So CRG in short. Now, what is CRG? So kidney, as we know, is a very complex organ, and a lot of things are going basically in kidney. So if a person donates one kidney, the second kidney temporarily grows bigger. And this is important for the survival of the donor. But not all people undergo CRG, and it can lead to their death. So can we understand the gene regulatory network and basically the genes triggering this CRG mechanism, so that maybe we can predict ahead of time before they donate their kidney that whether they'll undergo CRG or not? So again, we'll be inferring CRG in GRNs in this project. And another interesting thing is getting human data for CRG is obviously has like legal issues and is not very easy. Also, this kidney structure and function is actually conserved across different vertebrates. So let's say human, pig, mouse, and rat. These have conserved function across species. So why not make use of this information and help, basically this evolution can help us transfer the knowledge from different species like pig, mouse, and rat to human. And so with our collaborators in Canada, University of Toronto, we actually have got novel pig, mouse, and rat data. And for human, we are using publicly available data sets for this. So we have control and then different time points. That is when kidney is removed. So what happens, let's say after 2 hours, what happens after 6 hours. So very similar goals again, generation of the multi-species data like we did in SONAR, and then how to infer GRNs for this project. and then basically seeing how are these GRNs converging or diverging, and wet lab validation. So for cell type specific, inferring the cell types, we have NMF, we already saw, TMF, and there are some more tools. And then for the GRN inference, again, we can use different tools. So I think I'll briefly touch upon TMF. So TMF differs from NMF. So TMF stands for tree-guided non-negative matrix factorization. In NMF, we can just consider two species at a time, but in NMF, in TMF, what we can do is earlier when we were considering just a list of basically movie ratings and users, here we can consider, let's say, different platforms, Netflix, Hulu, or YouTube. And let's assume that there are different users in each of these platforms, but the list of movies is similar. So what TMF does is, so basically we infer U and V matrices, the smaller two matrices. So the common site can restrict the algorithm to have the factors of two related species to be similar. Again, in the optimization problem, we have a regularization parameter to basically restrict this. Some quick stats about why we need CHTC for TMF again. So for one TMF run with 23 sample matrices for the human multi-ohm kidney data, with around 1,000 to 25,000 cells per sample, the memory usage was 60 gigabytes per run. And this was basically the different times for different K. K stands for the number of clusters. So if we consider just one run and we consider different parameters as we do, so just for 1K, it would take 42 to 43 days approximately without Condor. So again, we use Condor for this thing. And yeah, so basically, all in all, I wanted to emphasize on these two examples. And there are a couple of more directions in our lab which we are working on. Gene regulatory networks is just one. And yeah, I am happy to take any questions now.
Any good war stories of how Condor broke for you, or things that you had to fix to make it go, or
So
stories from the trenches?
not specifically for these two projects, but I remember one of my lab mates mentioning that this is another PDRMN tool which he uses. So it takes a long time, like minimum of 2-3 weeks to run. So after 1.5 weeks or so, he was just monitoring the progress, and probably I don't know how safe it is to say here, but then in the e-logs, which we basically mention like what our daily work is, which is daily mentioning that I am tracking these jobs. Turned out after 1.5 weeks, all the jobs were in hold. So that was pretty interesting.
Time.
Yeah.
Run time.
You have to like basically just check also if the jobs are in hold or stuff. That can be an issue, but yeah.
Other questions for Prakriti? I'll have one more question for you. So how much computing had you done before joining the Roy Lab? A lot, a little?
So in my bachelor's, I did research for 3 years. So in that, I actually trained a large language model for COVID-19, but our lab had good GPUs there. So we didn't use any external resources. But yeah, CHTC, I think, is probably great because although Roy Lab has 10 or I think 11 servers all in all and 2 GPUs, but there are so many people sharing limited local resources. So it's practically impossible to run all the things together.
Yeah.
So.
What was one of the most challenging things about kind of switching from running on the GPUs to running in CHTC?
I think once you get the hang of how to use those Condor scripts, that's important But actually, I forgot to mention. But then when I was asking my lab that what are the positives or challenges you feel about CHTC so that like I can convey here, we had just one consensus that the staff is really helpful and basically their turnaround time is really quick. So yeah, they were all thanking you. So I should mention that.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.